Shalom and welcome to People on the Path. My name is Adam Lowy, and I am the lifelong learning Moreh Derech at Congregation Beth Shalom in San Francisco. Each month, I will welcome dynamic guests to discuss, learn, and consider what it means to be on the path. How does an individual's choices impact their path? How do the various communities that an individual participates in change their lives forever? What unsuspecting moments became the powerful ones that inform personal and professional journeys? Where does one's relationship to their Jewish identity take surprising turns, and how does it spiritually manifest? I intend for the conversation to be intimate, unscripted, and informal. The possibilities and potential will be infinite. The directions, ways, and paths will be explored, discovered, and open. Let us please take a walk together on this month's People on the Path. And it has become our tradition for me to check in with our senior rabbi, Rabbi Dan Ain, before I introduce our guests. So, Rabbi Ain, welcome to this month's People on the Path.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing today?
Well, the sun's out. That's new. So that's good. We'll take it.
Yeah, I was
How
going
about
to ask
yourself?
you, it was been pretty intense weather the last couple days. How was that for you and your family? What did you guys manage to do while we were all, again, in another form of lockdown?
We got wet. We got wet. I think we watched a trilogy of Ben Stiller museum movies, Night at the Museum movies. I think a trilogy was seen. But just a lot of wetness. Very wet here, which is good. As I've been saying, we will take the rain over what we have experienced around this time of the year in previous years. Absolutely.
And anything that you want to tell our community about some of our reopening plans? Some things have changed.
Yeah, it's very
Some things have been
exciting.
lifted a little bit.
We're going to be bringing back Kiddush. I know that I've always said, Adam, that the most popular program we run at Congregation Beth Shalom is our Saturday afternoon Kiddush. More people attend our Kiddush, I think, than any other program. And people miss getting together and having, a little bit of a schnapps, a little bit of a nosh, and chatting on a Saturday, on a Shabbat. I think that's really some of the taste of Shabbat that a lot of us have been missing. So we're eagerly looking forward to getting back to that, to breaking bread together, and to, having all those fun conversations and those relaxing times with friends and family that we miss.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And yes, I'm just so grateful that we can move in that direction. Do you want to give a little plug for this Saturday?
Sure. So this Saturday, well, first I want to give a plug for what your guest has been doing. So she joined me last week for my Wednesday, and I'm going to let you introduce her. But if anybody hasn't had the chance to watch last week's lunch study program, I invite you to do that. On November 3rd, for our lunch study program, David Israel Katz is going to be joining us. We've been getting some questions around how do we, as congregants or as new members of the synagogue, how do we integrate ourselves into tefillah, into prayer, when we struggle theologically with the meaning of the words of the prayers? Since David is such a wonderful educator, he's going to bring some of his methodology and his teachings that he brought to our community over the high holidays, that he brings to our students in the religious school to that conversation. That'll be on Wednesday, November 3rd at noon. And then this Shabbat, we have State Senator Scott Weiner, who is the vice chair of the California Jewish Legislative Council, who's going to be joining us, who's going to be talking about anti-Semitism, the California Ethnic Studies curriculum, and other issues that are, going on in our political environment. So that should be a good, again, we're returning to Kiddush, we're returning to Bima dialogue, and hopefully soon, Adam, will return to hugging.
Yes, I hope so. Well, lots of good things to look forward to. Thank you for all the work and for moving us along here. I will bring you back in a little while that you can also have some time with our guest again. As many of you may know in the community, this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And to recognize and honor this time, we have a very special People on the Path guest. It is my privilege to welcome Naomi Tucker. Naomi Tucker is the founding executive director of Shalom Bayit. the Bay Area's hub for organizing gender-based violence prevention through a Jewish lens. With 38 years of expertise in the field, Naomi has been instrumental in developing a national Jewish communal response to abuse and advocating to make women's safety and empowerment a visible part of the Jewish social justice agenda. Naomi co-authored some of the first Jewish healing rituals for survivors of abuse. In 1992, the Love Shouldn't Hurt Jewish Teen Dating Violence Prevention Curriculum. In 2007, and Faith and Violence-Free Families, an interfaith clergy training manual for the California Department of Public Health. Naomi serves on multiple advisory boards, including the National Task Force to Combat Jewish Poverty, the National Needs Assessment for Jewish Women International, and the Reveal Research Study on Domestic Abuse in Affluent Communities. She is a writer, trainer, and national expert on faith-based approaches to ending gender-based violence. Naomi, welcome to People on the Path.
Hi, Adam. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. How are you? How are you generally doing these days?
I'm good. Thank you. It's been quite an intense year and a half. I think for anyone who's in leadership of an organization during the pandemic, and definitely for all of us who work in the domestic violence field. But I'm also just incredibly grateful to have a job and a safe home and community to be cuddling with through this time. So I'm good and grateful.
Excellent. So Naomi, as I've described to you, that this is largely going to be a conversation about you, about how you came to be who you are in our community, how you came to do the work that you do. And before we kind of jump into what led you to that, I just wanted to ask, what's it like running Shalom Bayit during Domestic Violence Awareness Month? Is there things that ramp up, especially during that month? How do you as an organization honor this particular time of the year? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, you can see that I'm wearing purple, which is the color of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And this is a month where domestic violence programs around the country have an intensified effort all at the same time to raise awareness about this issue that often people don't talk about. And so, yes, we have lots more activities and just have really a ramped up time when we are engaging the community this time of year in thinking about how they can talk about this with their peers and their friends and their family, and how we can just make domestic violence an issue that has no shame, that can be talked about in the public sphere. And that's actually really what helps people come out of the shadows who need help. So the more we can engage the community, the more we can really stop the problem. So this is definitely a big and busy month for us. Is also typically our busiest client spike of the year. That happens right after the Chagim. So October is very often a time when a lot of people are reaching out for help, partly because of all the awareness raising that we do beginning with the High Holy Days. So it's really, we're kind of nearing the end of a season of a very big push for us, and lots of public events.
Amazing. Thank you. I want to figure out, so in your bio, it said 38 years, right, that you founded Shalom Bayit.
So actually, 38, I've been doing domestic violence work for 38 years.
Okay.
But founded Shalom Bayit in March of 1992, so just over 29 years ago.
Wow.
That's how long Shalom Bayit has been alive and well.
Amazing. So I want to figure out how you got to that, but I just first want to ask, like, how did you do it? How did you do that 29 years ago? What did you have to do to make it a legitimate organization? I mean, I remember, almost as far back as that, walking into bathrooms at synagogues and seeing notes or seeing kind of Shalom Bayit was being advertised. I was working with early childhood education with lots of Jewish families, and so I would go into the women's bathroom because that was the bathroom we used with the kids when they went in to use the bathroom. So I would see that. I mean, in the mid 90s, I was seeing it. So how did you do it? What did you have to go through to get it up and running?
Well, it was not easy. I'm really glad to hear you saw our stickers, because the bathroom is sometimes, it's that place where people can look at something privately and put it in their pocket and use it when they need it. So that's great to know that way back then you were seeing them. Yeah, it really was born out of a need and a spark. So at the time I was working in a battered women's shelter in San Mateo. And I was asked to co-chair a national task force on Jewish domestic violence that was run by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And while I was totally honored, I actually kind of laughed. Like I said to them, I can't do that. I work in a battered women's shelter and I happen to be Jewish, but there's really no link between those things. And I see very few Jewish women who come through our doors in the shelter. And I didn't feel at the time that I could represent Jewish survivors of domestic violence, because I just wasn't hardly seeing any of them. And I didn't, honestly, Adam, I didn't really see a link between being Jewish and doing this work at that time. Now I can sort of look back and laugh at that. But anyway, so this organization didn't take no for an answer. They wanted me to chair this national task force. And so finally I said, okay, I'll do it, but only if I can gather national input from people other than me. It needs to be just bigger than me. So I called everyone I knew who was Jewish and worked in the domestic violence space, which at that time in March of 1992 actually turned out to be a lot of people. There were many Jews doing social justice work. So a number of them were volunteers working with me and people from all over the Bay Area. And we had a meeting. And at that meeting, we sat literally around someone's kitchen table in Foster City. And I said, what would you like to see on a national Jewish domestic violence agenda? And they basically said to me, agenda shmenda. We don't care about your national Jewish domestic violence agenda. We care about why no one is talking about this issue in the Bay Area right here, right now. Let's do something about that. And so that day at that kitchen table, those women together, we wrote a name and a mission statement that are Shalom Bayit's name and mission statement today. So it really was born of passion to address this issue in our own community, and it grew slowly over time from a volunteer-led task force, which it was for its first decade, to the point in 2001 where we had grown so much that we needed to hire staff and open an office. So for me, thinking about my path, I like to joke that I'm an accidental executive director. I really didn't choose that. I didn't go to nonprofit management school, but I had been doing this work as an advocate, and I saw a need and I stepped in to fill it, basically.
I think that speaks to who you are, right? That sometimes leadership finds the leader, and I believe that there is a reason. So, did you end up participating in that national conference or that national presentation?
I did. For 5 years, I chaired the National Jewish Task Force of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I met incredible other Jewish leaders from around the country doing this work. And we developed national agendas, and it was really a very meaningful piece of my career, serving on I became board secretary of that organization as well. So serving on a national board, doing this work, and just seeing how advocates from around the country were encountering both similarities and differences in how we do this work. I would be working with someone from rural South Carolina or Georgia just as often as I was working with someone from New York or California. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
So you were working in 1992 in San Mateo at a battered women's shelter. Tell us a little bit about what was life like for you growing up. Where did you grow up? What do you think about your family life kind of perhaps laid in either the foundation or some of the values that you would eventually then get into this field?
I definitely think my family life and my Jewish upbringing had a lot to do with becoming an activist, around many issues as a young adult. And and the values that my parents instilled in me came directly from their experience growing up as Jews. So I see it as multi-generational and very connected to the Jewish experience. My family is from Brooklyn, New York, and that's where I was born. We moved to San Francisco when I was young, and so I basically grew up in the city. So this is my home. And growing up, I wasn't part of Jewish life in a really deep way, certainly not in the way that I am now. I didn't have Jewish education. I didn't have a bat mitzvah. And I saw myself as a secular Jew. I, in my activist young years, had difficulty with organized religion and at the same time, incredibly strong Jewish identity. And I really credit my parents with that. One of the things that I remember very distinctly as a young child that my parents said to me over and over again was just this idea that I could do anything or make anything happen that I believed in deeply. And also, as the children of Holocaust survivors, my parents knew what it was like to experience danger and hatred in the world. And they really carried with them that historical memory and passed it on to me through their teaching of, even if the world is hostile out there or you see injustice, it's your responsibility to go and fight for us and for justice. And that was just a very core value in my family, and something that I think led me as a teen and then young adult to be someone who not only believed in social justice, but who felt like I could make a difference. And that, I think, from both activism that I did, for example, in the LGBT community, to my activism in the domestic violence field, and just, being a young feminist Jewish queer activist, and feeling proud of that, the pride in that, and the ability to go and do it even when it was against a lot of outside pressures, and to be undaunted. I don't know, I think that's some kind of combination of my family's Jewish values and maybe my New York personality.
So your parents, you were you not affiliated family when you were a child? Were you not synagogue goers?
We came from an Orthodox family in New York, and my parents didn't really find community that felt like home to them here, but we did belong to a synagogue. We were Sheretz Israel members, and we went definitely, and we were kind of once a year Jews for the High Holy Days. So my brother was bar mitzvahed at Sheretz Israel and went to Brandeis Day School and had a very wonderful experience. That was back in the day when Brandeis for many years was at Sheretz Israel. So a long time ago. But yeah, we definitely were part of a synagogue, but I personally just think I was pretty detached from that. And I really, I have to say that I found my spiritual home and coming back to Judaism as a spiritual path through my work at Shalom Bayit. And so starting Shalom Bayit for me was not just a coming home in terms of merging my Jewish identity and my professional work, but also really brought me Judaism in a deeper, really meaningful way. And that really happened in two ways. First, it happened because I was creating Jewish healing rituals for women. So we were trying to figure out, okay, what someone who's been through this, what can we do for them Jewishly that helps women heal? And we put together, our very first one was a Sukkot gathering in the fall of 1992. And then we just started with a Jewish calendar cycle of different holidays and Rosh Chodesh gatherings until we had pretty much something that you could do every month for women to come. And I was co-leading those healing circles with one of Shalom Bayit's co-founders, Rebecca Schwartz. And she was my teacher in so many ways. And we would sit down together and she would say, okay, here are some themes. And she would bring the Jewish content. I called her my resident Rebbe. And I would bring, the domestic violence themes, and we would write ritual and drashot and different things together. And so I learned from leading those rituals, and I could hold ritual space, but I needed someone to actually be my teacher. And so we were a great pair. And actually that became our model for public speaking. Also, we always, because we were volunteer led, we didn't have like a community educator, but we would always pair someone with deep content knowledge in working in violence against women with someone with deep Jewish knowledge, which at the time I really didn't feel I had. So that was sort of, for me, one really powerful path was learning that there was this, feminist Judaism that had incredible healing power, that was maybe not your traditional Judaism, that we had the power to write our own liturgy and ritual and content and really have ownership of a kind of Judaism that was meaningful, not just to me, but to our clients who were people that who felt pushed out of the Jewish community because of the abuse that had happened to them. And so we were not only creating meaningful Judaism for them, but we were helping them reconnect to Jewish community. And through that, I reconnected to Jewish community. The second piece of that for me was just later becoming an organizational leader when I became the executive director in the year 2000. And that was in that pivotal moment where we were transitioning from a volunteer-led collective to a funded organization. And as a Jewish leader, I became part of the Jewish community in a really different way. And so, back to the accidental ED, I didn't choose, gosh, I think I'll have a career path in the Jewish community, but it was so deeply meaningful to me. And so I think, unlike a lot of other Jewish leaders who maybe came from a much more educated childhood grounded in Jewish education, I really had to learn on the fly, but it has been extraordinary.
I love hearing that story because after hearing you speak the other day with Rabbi Ain at the Lunch and Learn, I never would guess that you were not deeply rooted in it forever. I mean, the references you were making to Jewish text and to Jewish values and to just Jewish wisdom in general that you were sharing. I love that you've grown into that through your own path, through your own experience, and I think that it's really a beautiful way to celebrate that Judaism there for us at any time when we're ready to be in it and ready to embrace it and ready to use it as a place to step and a place to build ourselves. So I love that. It's really a wonderful story. Is Rebecca still very involved? Are you both very active together in this work?
Rebecca is still in the Bay Area. She herself is a published author and incredible Jewish educator. She works on the peninsula. And she has served in just about every role at Shalom Bayit. She was our associate director. She's been on the board. She was our Jewish programs director. And she is off doing a different career path at the moment, but always a part of Shalom Bayit, and definitely always in my life as the person who brought me and us to where we are now. She's definitely still around. She actually is the person who co-authored the Women's Haggadah. She's an incredible scholar and writer.
Excellent. I want to go back a teeny bit to, you're saying that you were kind of, your family was kind of the once a year kind of Jews show up at Shereth Israel, I'm assuming on the high holidays. And you said though that kind of fighting for justice was a big piece of your family's values. When your parents were kind of encouraging that, or maybe even demonstrating that through their own activism, was that through a Jewish lens? Were they saying that we do this because we're Jewish, or were they saying it because they were strong-willed New Yorkers who believe that that's what happens in the world?
They were definitely saying it because they were Jewish. For my mom, in particular, she really emphasized the fact that, you know, her parents coming here, they wouldn't even really talk about their experiences before coming to the US. And they never talked about themselves as immigrants. If you ask them questions about life before coming here, they would say, don't talk about the old country. And there was, you know, a lot of shame and a lot of pressure to assimilate. But from what my mom gleaned from their experience, she, for her, it was deeply rooted in the Holocaust and deeply rooted in the Jewish experience of being persecuted, right? So for her, it was about, if somebody tries to squash your identity or ultimately to, you know, to harm you or to kill you, you know, you have to stand up before that happens. And so it was not just about anti-Semitism. She really saw that as applying to anything. So for example, when I was in college and I was coming out, that, you know, my mother saw that as, well, that's something that you fight for too, you know, that like, you are who you are and you get to be all of who you are, and don't let anybody else put you down. So while it applied to things not Jewish in terms of other social justice causes, it came directly from her experience of like what happened to the Jewish people, and what we could glean from that in terms of standing up for ourselves as well as others.
Did you so at this point I'm kind of recognize that your mother was a pretty powerful teacher for you. You mentioned Rebecca Schwartz as a powerful teacher. Can you point to any other teachers that you kind of look back on in your childhood that were influential, that gave you the strength, the courage to embrace who you were and to power through and to power on into kind of this type of work? Can you find anybody? Can you tell us? Can we honor any other people?
Yeah, definitely. Well, one more thing I just want to say about my parents. You know, my parents were not afraid to go against the grain, and that is something that that I really watched them do and took to heart. So like my mom in the 70s had a women's studies collective. You know, this was like in the height of the women's movement, and she had a group of women that would come over to the house. And in that very classic way, when you think about the 70s and people watching movies of birthing babies and learning about our bodies and learning to be empowered and learning to talk about our lives and sort of busting out of the you know, Betty Crocker home ec mythology of what women should be. That was my mom, even though, you know, she didn't consider herself to be radical or progressive really in any way. But that's what I grew up with in my living room as a young child growing up in the Sunset in San Francisco. And my dad was a physician at CPMC. And someone who also was like, I'm here for my patients, and I'm not necessarily going to follow, you know, the rules of how long you can see a patient or what's the latest managed care hoo-ha. I'm here to save lives. And he was an amazing critical care specialist and the head of the intensive care unit at CPMC for many, many years. And so both my parents were like, you have to think about what is right and important, not what other people tell you to do or how to dress or how to be. And so that was very formative for me. When I was in high school, among many incredible teachers, one person that I would love to lift up is Eleanor Mcbride. She was my high school biology teacher at Wilmerding High School. She was, in addition to being an amazing biology teacher, I can still picture her lectures today. She took a group of us to the local battered women's shelter, La Casa de las Madres, for a service learning project. And we went in there to rehab a floor that had been condemned and spent several days like painting rooms and redoing them so that women could come and stay there. And that's the moment that I was first exposed to this work, and walking into a battered women's shelter changed my life forever. So I really credit her with, you know, dragging a bunch of snarly teens to do this project that who knew that would end up opening the gates to my career path. But I do remember standing in the hallway of that battered women's shelter and thinking, this is where the real revolution is happening. Like, you can read about feminism in a book, you can, work to make things happen in politics, but these women did not read something about women's empowerment in a book. They just somehow figured out that it was, that they could find the strength to up and leave against all odds and against all the social pressures that at the time, people just didn't leave their husbands or their families. And women didn't venture out on their own, and women were relatively new in the workforce. So I really felt the bravery of those women. It was so palpable, and I just felt like this is where I need to be.
That's amazing. Does Eleanor know that have you stayed in touch? Does she know what you've gotten into?
Oh yes, Mrs. McBride. She's retired now, but yes. So when I was honored, and I can't even remember, a long time ago, for my 25 years in the field. So that was maybe like 13 years ago. And at that event, I reached out to her and let her know. And we had a really wonderful conversation. It was the first time that we had reconnected.
Wow.
And I think that was really meaningful for her to know that she'd had an influence over something, even though it wasn't directly related to biology. But that's the magic of teachers, right? That they have such a powerful influence over young people in sometimes unexpected ways, and are often mentors in a much more well-rounded way than just the subject that they are teaching. But I'll tell you something. Yesterday, there was an amazing NPR interview special with Jane Goodall, who is in her 90s now. And I have Eleanor Mcbride also to thank for my love of Jane Goodall. So they're just, they're things that you draw from your childhood and ways that those things connect. And I will always be grateful to her.
That is amazing. Thank you for elevating the space a teacher can hold for somebody, and I love those moments of it's not necessarily about the content of the curriculum that really changed you and really had an impact on what you've been doing now for nearly 40 years. I mean, it's just astounding.
It's character development, right? I mean, that is so much what educators provide to young people, character development.
Yes, I hope. Yes. The good ones should be doing that for sure. And see the people and see the people in front of them versus the syllabus that's on their desk.
I think that's actually why our youth programs are so powerful also. So we run at Shalom Bayit, Love Shouldn't Hurt, which is a healthy relationships education program for Jewish youth, middle school through college. And one of the reasons that all the teens who experience it really love it, as well as their educators, is that it is making their Jewish education meaningful in a life skills way, right? So it's connecting the dots between this Jewish education that they're getting and how they actually apply that to their lives, and how Judaism can be part of that toolbox for the choices that they make. So it's so relevant to their everyday experience. And I think that's really that same light shining on education and educators as helping young people become the people they want to be, as well as the knowledge that they're taking in.
Wow, that should be used as a promotional message for Jewish education, good Jewish education. It should happen that way. And we're certainly trying to do that with our youth at Beth Shalom. I want to ask you one more question before we bring Rabbi Ain into this conversation. And I actually ask pretty much every one of our guests this question. And if you could say one sentence to Jewish leadership of institutions and organizations, what would that sentence be?
One sentence to leadership.
Yeah, Jewish leadership of institutions, of organizations.
If I could only say one sentence, I would say the hallmark of your leadership is whether your actual organization reflects the values that your organization promotes. Right? So our job as leaders is to lead internally as well as externally, and to make sure that our organizations are modeling the values that we are teaching, which is why, for me, I'm leading an organization that's about respect and dignity and empowering people towards safety. And so I need to lead that way internally. And I think we often don't think about how our the alignment between public and private values, right? So Jewish leaders who are the mouthpiece of Jewish values to the community need to not only just talk about them, but actually live them in their personal lives, in their organizations, in their leadership. And we need to support each other to do that, because it isn't always easy.
Excellent. Thank you. Rabbi Ain, are you with us?
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, Naomi. It's good to see you again today. Thank you for your conversation last week. I've been sharing the lessons that you shared with our community throughout the week. And I just wanted to, I have so many questions from the conversation. I mean, I want to know why the Jewish community does that historically. Why do we alienate people? Why don't people feel comfortable in that space? I mean, I'm curious if you mentioned briefly growing up in an Orthodox environment. Why historically have we been unfriendly or unwelcoming? What is that about?
I think it's about protection. We have been we have for generations and generations upon generations been on the defensive, right? And so for any community that has experienced oppression, you don't want to give the outsiders any more reason to oppress you. You don't want to therefore air your dirty laundry. And this is why the whole concept of like Shonda, of admit, we don't want to admit any internal wrongdoing because it would be a Shonda, is really about fear of what other people will think of us or do to us. And that fear is, like with any stereotype, there's a little bit of, reality behind it, right? So there is not, we don't necessarily have the need to do that anymore, but there are still reasons to be afraid, right? Anti-Semitism is alive and well. And so, those are just generational habits. And I think it's really important for us to recognize them and break those patterns, because they're not serving us. It does lead us to say, well, Jews don't have those problems, right? We don't have
That's right.
violence, we don't have substance abuse, we don't have poverty, we don't have mental health issues. And whenever you say that and you silence those issues, then real people who are struggling with those issues don't get help.
Yeah, well, I mean, so let me just go a little bit. What is it about thinking so much about what other people will think? Marit Ayin. Why is that such a dominant sort of characteristic in the psyche of so many Jews, in particular in the psyche of Jews out here in the Bay Area?
Well, because of what what people have actually done to us, right? I mean, you look at pogroms in Russia or the Holocaust, or, even if you take it back to, the Inquisition or the ways that anti-Semitism operated to, put Jews as the middle people, right? Who did the work of the people in power by oppressing those, the poor folks without power, so that, the kings and the fiefs would look good. And so you actually have, like, it's such a setup, and it's why untangling Judaism and racism and many other kinds of oppression and classism is so complicated, because that was the role that Jews were relegated to in society. And from the bottom, it looked like we had a lot of power. And in some ways, maybe we did, sort of like the Mordechai, when, like, or versus the Haman. And so, I think that, when you look at Jewish history, those fears come from very real places of what people have actually done, to us. And so it's reactive. And, maybe we can say in this day and age, we could move to a place where we don't have to be reactive and certainly not acting from historical memory, but we still do have to have a consciousness, because as we've seen, even in the last several years, you can always have another wave of anti-Semitism. So I think it is about figuring out, what do we actually have to be afraid of, and what do we not have to be afraid of? So yes,
Yep.
we actually have to respond to anti-Semitism, and talking about the realities of what's going on in our lives that's not what's fueling anti-Semitism. So I think we have to separate the fear from the actual strategic places where we need to move and change people's hearts and minds.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mention that the untangling of racism and anti-Semitism, as we untangle the ways in which we have been oppressed, we also simultaneously untangle our privilege, which we don't want to acknowledge. And those two seemingly can go hand in hand from time to time in ways that can make us uncomfortable. That's a really fascinating point that you mentioned.
Sorry,
Did I freeze there? I think
yeah, I
that
think we
might have
froze
been-
for a second.
Well, I think that might have been me freezing. I was just saying that that's a really fascinating point. The one thing I just want to add, and then I'll bounce off because I think my internet's a little shaky, is we've been talking a lot about women, and one of the things you mentioned in our discussion last week is that the expression Shalom Bayit is heard in the state of Israel as a way to keep women oppressed. The effort to maintain the marit and avoid the evil eye and to look the right way leads people to hear that expression Shalom Bayit in an oppressive fashion. And my question for you is, we have an increasing number of, I guess, relationships that are not heteronormative in our community. And I'm curious, it's probably maybe even more challenging for people in those relationships to come forward. So I want to thank you again. I'm going to turn off my camera, and I'd love to hear you address people in those situations.
Sure. Yeah. And always nice to see you again, Rabbi. Yeah. So domestic violence really knows no boundaries. It happens at the same rate. About 1 in 4 people will, 1 in 4 women in heterosexual relationships, but also 1 in 4 gay men and lesbians, and even higher in the trans community, will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. But it happens to Jews and non-Jews, to Jews of all denominations, across the age span, in poor to affluent communities. It really knows no boundaries, and therefore it happens in all kinds of relationships. So this is something that I think is sometimes hard for people to understand, but while there is a gender component in heterosexual relationships, it usually happens along gender lines, though not always. It also happens in same-sex relationships, in folks where one or both partners are non-binary or transgender. Like, that doesn't matter. And you're absolutely right that when that happens to someone, it's the same story that we just told about the Jewish community, right? If you've already experienced oppression for your relationship, or there's some reason why you're afraid to talk about what's going on, you're definitely going to be less likely to go and seek help, right? So we don't see lower rates in the LGBT community, for example, but we do see that help seeking is more difficult because people may not want to admit that there's a problem when they've worked so hard to convince their family and friends that their relationship is okay to begin with.
Thank you, Rabbi Ain, for your questions, and thank you, Naomi, for fielding those. And yeah, I wanted to ask that same question. I'm assuming that Shalom Bayit, when you first founded it, was really based more kind of on a binary gender relationships, and as the world it continues to progress, and it's, I can just say for my children, it's just such a normal part of their language right now, and they talk a lot about it, and pronoun usage, and so I'm glad to hear that you are recognizing that this happens to everybody, regardless of where you lie on the binary spectrum and how you identify, and I'm sure it's added again more learning to your work to figure out how to support everybody in the community that needs the support.
Thank you. And actually, we have always done that. We actually didn't start out supporting people in heterosexual relationships, more. I don't know. I mean, I'm the leader of Shalom Bayit, and I came from being an LGBT activist. So I don't think I would have let that happen in the beginning, even in 1992. But I think you're right in saying that the world has caught up in many ways, and the world has definitely evolved, and we have a much more expansive understanding, thank goodness, of gender and sexual orientation now. But we definitely were talking about that both at Shalom Bayit and in the broader battered women's movement. So if you look at the battered women's movement, or now we say in a more gender inclusive way, the domestic violence movement, if you look at it back to its origins in the early 1970s, it actually never was exclusively focused on heterosexual relationships. And that's something that is, really true of the feminist movement overall. Although, of course, in the 70s, there was a lot of division because homophobia exists everywhere. So, the very earliest understandings of domestic violence, when you look at the first book that was published, which actually was published right here in San Francisco by Del Martin. She wrote the first book in the country about domestic violence, and it was called Battered Wives. So that's pretty interesting that even she, as a lesbian activist, and she and her Del Martin and of blessed memory, and her partner Phyllis Lyon were the first lesbian couple to be married by Gavin Newsom in San Francisco and in the state of California. And they were really pioneers back in the 1950s in feminist organizing across the country. But even Del Martin, her understanding of domestic violence in the very beginning was, just by the title of her book, Battered Wives, was about women in marriage. But that changed pretty quickly in our movement, particularly as women who were in relationships with other women also started coming forward and saying, hey, this can happen to anybody. So Shalom Bayit has definitely always been on the forefront of that, and I like to think that the rest of the world is catching up to us now.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I just want to make sure that our listeners and people watching are hearing loud and clear that that Shalom Bayit is there for everybody, every potential victim, survivor, children, all are a part of this trauma if it's happening in and around you. And so Shalom Bayit is here for you. So please, everybody listening, know that. And Naomi will be the warm and welcoming embrace that you find, and all the people that work for her organization. So so great to have this conversation. And Naomi, we have arrived to the speed round of questions. As I gave you the heads up before we started on today. And are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So first question, and then these I mostly ask our guests these same questions. So what are the 5 necessities that you must have with you on the path?
A clear sense of yourself, surrounding yourself with the right people, groundedness, I think we just all we all have to be grounded in ourselves. That's something that I'm very big on. A sense of purpose. And I think self-care.
Mm,
We have to take care of ourselves on the journey, particularly if your journey is something that is about doing big things in the world, whether that is creating social change or being a parent, or leading others, we have to take care of ourselves along the way.
I love your answers. I love how different all the guests take this question in particular. Some people often give kind of very material things that they need to bring with, like their dog or their a water bottle. And no surprise that everything that you told us was really about your internal spiritual self. And that does not surprise me one bit after getting to know you, Naomi. So thank you for sharing that. My next question.
If I was stranded, if I was like, what can you take when you're stranded on desert island? I would definitely take my dogs.
Let's recognize the dogs. Yeah, so they can come with you. I'm assuming that they are part of the groundedness. To be honest, is probably your animals help you in staying grounded.
Oh yeah.
So my next question is, do you have a favorite Jewish holiday, and what is it?
My favorite Jewish holiday is Sukkot. I mean, I love all the Jewish holidays, right? Like, what could be wrong with a miracle in a latke or Passover? I love leading a Seder. I can't wait till we can do that again, like in real life. 2 years of virtual Seders. Wait, I really love all of them. Honestly, I could find joy in everything. Tu B'Shvat, oh my goodness, we are so rich with holidays. But Sukkot is my favorite holiday because it is this moment where even in our vulnerability, we are pushed to find gratitude and joy.
Mm. Amen. If you could walk the path with any person, this person can be still living, they can be a person from our past, could be even a person as their future self. Who would you like to walk the path with?
Oh my gosh. Who would I like to walk the path with? I would like to walk the path with um, a circle of friends and loved ones who lift me up and who challenge me and who laugh with me and who teach me.
Mm.
I think I'm never a fan of choosing one. The more you get to know me, you'll know. Like if you ask me my favorite color, I'll be like, "What? Today it's purple. My office is purple. I love purple, lots of purple. But I also love, a nice teal blue, and then there's black, which is just a great always color. And yeah, I'm not a person who can ever answer like the favorite food or the favorite person, but I do really think that like we all need our people to walk on the path with us, no matter what that looks like, and it's different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need community in one way or another. And some people get that through intimate relationships and through friendships and through coworkers and lots of different ways. It's all good, but everybody needs whatever that something is.
Mm-hmm. And the final question that I have is, what do you see ahead of you on the path?
um I the pandemic has really taught me the value of slowing down.
Mm.
And while I'm ready for this, like everyone else, for this pandemic to go away, but that's one thing I'm definitely going to take with me. And I think that in this Shemitah year, I'm really thinking a lot about how we can all do that, even those of us who are busy social justice activists, like that it is important for us to nurture our souls along the way. So when I think about, I'm excited for, many more things that I'm going to do in my life, but I would like to do them with a little more groundedness and a little more spaciousness. I don't know, I just think, at my work at Shalom Bayit, there's so much more room for growth and creative ways that we're gonna change the way our community thinks about relationships. And just for me, that's really about infusing a culture of respect and a culture of consent into more places where, finding more nooks and crannies where it doesn't yet exist, or it's not quite where it should be. And how can we move the needle? So I'm excited to do that, sort of like with a Shemitah consciousness.
Beautiful. Anything else you'd like to share with our community?
Gosh, I want people to come get on that path with me. I mean, that's the thing. It's like so much more fun when you have like, a merry band walking down that path together. And so I just really, invite people to like get involved, or be on your own path in that way, or think about like what sparks joy in you for your purpose, that makes you feel like you're making a difference. I just feel so lucky that, people ask me all the time, isn't your work hard and isn't it depressing? And how is it that I mean, it's interesting that, we haven't really talked about that, but it is a common question that I get, like, how have you done this, for 38 years without just being so depressed? And, yes, doing this work is hard, but I get to wake up every day and watch women turning their lives around. I mean, it's like such a gift. And I think particularly because I came from doing this as my activism, that I feel like so incredibly lucky to be able to have this as my actual job. So I just, it's an honor for me to do this work and to have found at such a young age a career path that is both fulfilling and that is my passion, and that also is different every day. I've grown in so many ways. So I just feel very grateful to be where I am and wherever I might be going.
That's a wonderful lesson that that hard work, um, challenging work, difficult topics can actually bring you joy. And I think that that's something that I think many of us avoid, some of those difficult experiences, because we always want to kind of just make sure we're hanging out in the side of joy. And so I think the wonderful lesson to hear from you is that, you know, to fight, to push, to advocate, to be active, as much as that there's many days that you are beat down, that you are exhausted, that this still is the essence is the joy when you see that the change that you're making for people, and that when they find themselves at your organization, that they're finding themselves there as a moment of real change, that this is a moment that they've been needing, and that you give them this potential to get control of themselves again, and to again move towards this potential spot of joyousness, of freedom, of celebration of who they are and what their life can be.
Yeah,
So
Emma, that is the essence of what Emma Goldman talked about in that quote of hers that is famous but often gets misquoted about, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. And what Emma Goldman was actually talking about is people's inalienable right to joy, and that even through the hard social change, yes, we need to find moments of joy, but that isn't just for the change makers, right? That part of what she believed in was that every human being has the right to experience joy. And if you are experiencing violence or afraid for your life, or you don't have enough food to eat, it's pretty hard to experience joy. And so part of our work for justice is about very simply giving people the right to be happy in their lives. And that everyone should have that, and we should all fight for that. And that's what I meant when I said I love Sukkot so much, is that it is a holiday that brings us back to joy. Like, even when we don't have a safe or permanent roof over our heads, and we might be experiencing the cold and the rain and the imperfect protection, we find a way to come together and experience joy. And that's such a quintessential Jewish teaching.
And that goes back to your merry band of community members, right? Celebrating together.
Yeah.
Naomi, thank you so much for allowing us to walk on your path with you today. I'm just going to end with this kind of my little announcement about what's coming. People on the Path is shared on the last Monday of each month, so please keep your eyes and ears open for the next edition, which will be available on Wednesday, November 24th. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I really hope this conversation has been valuable and will support your efforts to find your footing and balance as you continue to navigate and blaze your path. One step at a time, I encourage you to walk your path with courage, wonder, curiosity, an open mind, body, and spirit, as Naomi Tucker has surely done that. I wish everybody a shalom and nisiyah tova, safe travels on your journeys and on your path. And we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Naomi, thanks so much again. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure.